Hello, Joseph here. Just wanted to give you all a heads up. Danielle and I had a baby in between episodes, and so he is wide awake when we thought he would be napping. And so this episode, we weren't able to edit out all of his coos and the sound that he makes. And so we hope you will enjoy the addition of our fourth little co host this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmere Counseling, a podcast exploring therapeutic lessons we can glean from the work of our favorite author, Brandon Sanderson. I'm Joseph, a licensed marriage and family therapist.
I'm Danielle, a board-certified behavior analyst.
And I'm Garrett, a board-certified behavior analyst.
So first of all, today we want to thank everybody for your feedback. Research shows that feedback is key to change and progress, and that's true for us here at the podcast as well. So we love hearing from you and hope to keep growing together as we get to know how to do this podcast. With that feedback, we're going to be trying to give more detailed summaries of the book references we make. We've just reread all of the Stormlight books this year, but we recognize that you guys might not have.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's way too much content in the books that it's difficult to remember everything.
So that's something we'll be checking ourselves today, and let us know if it's helpful or if you need more or less or anything.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I need to do a quick fact check on myself, though. In our first episode, I said that I talked to my dad and brother about Stormlight. Well, I have since been corrected, and I also talked to my sister and my brother-in-law about Stormlight too. I got a little bit of harsh feedback for not saying that in the first episode, so I had to correct it now. It's corrected. I talked to all of them about it.
Credit to all the fans.
Yes, and all the families.
So today our spoiler warning is the same as our last two episodes. We're talking about the Stormlight Archive, books 1 through 4. We might mention novellas. We might mention Words of Brandon. We are not getting into Wind and Truth yet.
Hey.
Some of us haven't finished it.
Yeah.
Some of us haven't started it.
Oh, you need to. It's so good.
We're getting there.
Yep. We're going to get there eventually.
So today our therapy topic is challenging your thoughts or your habits or your beliefs. Looking at the things you do and the things you think and seeing if they're working for you. And if they're not working for you, being open to trying something different. Humans are creatures of habit, and we like familiarity, and we tend to get into routines and then just keep doing them because they're familiar. And sometimes the things that were working at one point aren't working anymore, or we end up just doing something because it's what we do rather than because it's actually helpful for us anymore. So we want to look at how we can check ourselves and challenge our thoughts and our habits to make sure things are working for us. And I keep saying the word working because workable is a term we use in acceptance and commitment therapy, just for explaining that whether a behavior is helpful in your life, whether it's adding to your life. So you're going to hear me keep using that term because I can't get away from it. I think I tried to say helpful in an earlier episode because I'm trying to keep things to layman's terms for the podcast, and it just didn't feel right. So workable is a term. It's pretty layman's anyway, so hopefully that's okay.
I think that the concept is simple enough that I think people can make that connection and understand what it is. And what really makes this important is because whenever we feel unhappy about life, when we feel stuck, and we just feel like there's something missing, I worked with a lot of clients on those type of feelings, and that may be an indication that you can benefit from this episode, and you can benefit from challenging your thoughts and habits and beliefs, or seeing what is it that you're doing in your life that just isn't working for you anymore.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to focus today. We'll get into some other characters, I think, but
Mhm.
we're going to focus our discussion on Dalinar and a specific arc he has where he challenges his cultural habits. In Way of Kings, he's inspired by the in-world book, The Way of Kings, and he starts to notice and comment on some things that he's just been doing his whole life and ask himself, like, why he and his whole culture haven't considered other options.
Mhm.
So, some examples of this are he notes that the Vengeance Pact has been going on for a long time and kept all of the Alethi noblemen away from Alethkar on the Shattered Plains, not benefiting their homeland, but fighting this Vengeance Pact that's not going anywhere. He also notes that shard blades that can cut right through stone are routinely used on the battlefield, but not ever used to cut stone.
Or digging ditches.
Yes. Yep. It doesn't help the common man dig ditches is one of
Mhm.
the phrases in there. So at this point, he's just starting to ask these questions in the Way of Kings. But he also makes this comment, and I'm pretty sure it's on the same page or in the same chapter as one of these observations about his culture, where he says, "A woman wanting to come to the battlefield was like a man wanting to read, unnatural." So just showing that he's starting to ask some of these questions, but he's not asking all of them yet. And you notice 3 books later, he is the man who wants to read.
Mhm. And he wrote his own book.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So looking at this arc that Dalinar has, I wanted to kick this episode off by asking you guys, what can we learn from Dalinar's experience about challenging our habits and opening ourselves up to other options?
Mhm. One of the things that occurred to me when you were giving the example is that this is Dalinar's experience of doing this is really close to real life. How we train our brain to notice more of these implicit, kind of subconscious things that we simply accept as a part of life. And so he didn't just like all of a sudden notice all the different things that he does that he never challenged, but little by little he trained himself to ask more questions. He trained himself to see more.
Yeah, Joseph, with you bringing that up, that reminds me of one of the stories. I believe it's in Oathbringer, where he goes through a kind of gradual process, and you get to see him change from like a warlord into more of a Knights Radiant kind of Dalinar. So
Hmm.
this takes place when they first visit Thaylen City. Dalinar's coming, and he wants to get the support of all the Thalens in order to get them on board of Team Urithiru. And he goes and the queen's own son is having a hard time respecting him. So he decides that he's going to draw out this conflict and get the son to challenge him to a duel. And so they have this duel where the son is trying to draw blood on Dalinar with a sword, and Dalinar eventually lets him. And so Dalinar gets hit with the sword, and because he's a Knight Radiant, he can heal. And so he heals and says, "You won the battle. That was awesome." And the son respects him, and everyone's super impressed. And they're like, "Oh, Dalinar's not going to hurt us." But Dalinar doesn't feel comfortable with it. He feels like that's not how it should be when a Knight Radiant visits you. So he thinks about it, and that's when he realizes that he can use his powers to start mending this city. If you guys all recall, the city was destroyed by the Everstorm, and so he starts healing statues and putting them back together with his bondsmith powers. And
Right.
that's when he realizes that he's going through this gradual process, and it took effort in that moment to change. But once it did, it felt good. It felt right because it was more in
Hmm.
line with his values.
Right. And it also showed the people that he's interacting with that he is making an effort that that also helped them to see, okay, yeah, we can work with you, rather than just, oh, you're this powerful being that we have to submit to. Like
Exactly.
at that point, there was still a lot of political tension where the lefty is still kind of the conquering one, or they're the more proactive one, in trying to create this coalition. With him changing that, helped people to come around to actually trusting him.
Yeah. And we see that that's what actually works for their coalition in the future is they start trusting him because he's not just trying to bully them into submission. They start
Hmm.
delegating responsibilities later in that book.
Right.
And
Yeah, with this progression Dalinar has into becoming, the bondsmith that
Hmm.
he is, later on, he's just shows so much flexibility and willingness to look at the situation and try something different.
Hmm.
Um, but like I mentioned earlier, humans like our routines. We like things that are familiar. There's actually some just really basic research with giving humans like a button pressing game. And if pressing the button fast wins the game at first, and then you change it to pressing the button slow, like we are so persistent and we will just keep pressing fast. It's just an inefficient amount of time that we keep doing the thing that's not working anymore.
Hmm.
Um,
Right. Like they continue to press the button fast, even though they were told you need to press the button slow now, and it takes a long
no,
time for them.
they're not
What?
told. They're not told.
Oh,
If you're told, then you can, that can
change
help
the
you
behavior.
change. But
Oh,
like,
okay.
if something's working and then it stops working, humans just tend to keep doing the thing that we're used to doing.
Right. So instead of looking at, okay, am I pressing the button in the wrong way? They just kept on pressing the button fast when the
Yeah,
rules have changed.
yeah. Well, and if
Oh.
you maybe you hesitate and you press one slow, and then you get the point or whatever on the game,
Hmm.
then confirmation bias kicks in, and the person's like, "Oh, I finally pressed it fast long enough that I finally got a point." When it's like, okay, no, it's because you pressed it slow.
Right, right, right. They didn't even realize that the rule had changed.
Right. Like we tend to just not want to change.
We're very stubborn as human beings.
Yeah. So it really takes a
Yeah.
conscious effort to pay attention to, hey, is what I'm doing actually benefiting me?
Hmm.
Let's look at actual outcomes of these habits and what else might work instead.
Hmm. Right. And speaking of this, I have worked with clients, a lot of times couples actually is when I see this a lot is they they will get locked into a certain way of interacting with each other, even though the way they were communicating and the way they're interacting with each other does not work and does not help them at all. But they kept doing that for like 20 years. And then finally they come in to see me and I just tell them to stop doing what they were doing and like introduce new ways that they can interact with each other and reminding them, hey, you can, when you first come home, you can do this and this instead of just doing what you always done. And it's so surprising how so many of my clients later on tell me that, how have I not thought about this? It sounds so simple. Like they always say this. They're like, and now I feel stupid because what you're proposing is so easy and so simple. And why didn't I just think of it? Right? It's because they have never really challenged themselves in what they do. Right? It's never like, what am I doing wrong that I'm not contributing to this conversation or making things go better.
Yeah. But when Dalinar is so actively, he is reading The Way of Kings and he's taking the time to think
Hmm.
about it
Right.
and apply it to his life.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. And I love, Joseph, that in your example, you're that person that can point it out to the people, because sometimes it really does take that outside perspective. It reminds
Hmm.
me of actually something I went through probably, oh, this was almost 8 years ago now. So one of my values is helping people, as I shared in an earlier episode. And I think it went into overdrive throughout my middle and high school and early adults, because I got really good at micromanaging people. I thought I knew the best way to help people, and so my way was the best way. And I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but that's how it feels looking back on it, is that
Hmm.
they just needed to follow what I was telling them to do because I knew how to help them. So
Hmm.
one day I was helping some friends move, and we were loading up this truck, and I was standing outside the moving truck, and my friend was putting a lamp into the moving truck. And from where I was standing, I thought I saw the perfect spot for that lamp. So I said, "Hey man, put the lamp right there in the corner." And he said, "No, Garrett, there's no room there." I said, "No, it's okay. Put the lamp in the corner. There's room there." He said, "I'm standing right by the corner, Garrett. There is no room there." And I said, no, trust me, I can see it. And he said, "Stop. I'm in the truck. You're not. There's no room." And so I dropped it. I was really mad and huffy. And I said, "Fine, whatever. Put it wherever you want." And kind of walked away, just a little bit frustrated that he didn't accept my help. So later we were driving after we helped move. And my friend looks at me and says, "Garrett, I love you, man, but you micromanage like crazy." I said, "No, I don't. I just want to help people." He said, "Yeah, and you micromanage. You try to tell them every little thing." I said, "No." But I started getting that feeling, probably the same feeling Dalinar gets, and people in your therapy sessions get, Joseph, of, oh, wait a second, I got to start looking at this. And so I thought about it, and I realized that I was micromanaging. I was trying to tell him where to put a lamp in a moving truck. I wasn't even in the moving truck. That if that's not micromanaging, I don't know what is. But it was a good wake up call that I was trying to live my values, but at some point I just drifted a little bit to where my value was like what I was doing with my actions was no longer in line. And I just needed to make that little change to back off and let people give people advice, of course, try to help them out, but at the end, letting them make their own choices. And so that was an example, I guess, from my life that I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, that's actually the perfect example, and that must have been a very awkward drive up until the point where your friend brought it up.
It was so awkward. There, you could cut the tension with a knife. It was cringy.
Or maybe it was bonding afterwards. Like, did it feel like it strengthened your relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. Afterwards, like I felt so close to that friend that he was able to just tell me those things. He's probably my closest friend for quite a bit after that.
Crucial conversations are worth it, guys.
Yes, yes, and yeah, and that's the same thing that I see in therapy room is couples who have who are willing to go into those more crucial conversations with each other. They often come out stronger in their relationship because they have gone through something that brings them together and makes them more united.
Well, and Garrett became the opposite of a micromanager because I would have had no idea if you hadn't said that story. Like, you come out stronger and it's worth it.
Yeah, there's a lot of unsaid thoughts bouncing around my head in the majority of my days that I just have to swallow.
But that's a good skill too.
Right, and we'll probably talk about that in a self-discipline episode later. But,
there we go.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about how those conversations can be hard, or that that situation. It started out with an argument and a fight with Garrett and his friend, right? Sometimes, or most of the time, when something goes wrong in your life, that presents an opportunity to look at what is wrong here. What can I change? I think we mentioned in the previous episode, if you look at your sour experiences, that can help show you what you value, right? Garrett got really probably into that argument because he's like, no, I really want to help people. This is really hard on me. But it shows you that you care about it, and then cues you into, okay, if I'm not feeling good about this, something might be missing here, or something might need to change here, and that can help guide you to start to challenge your actions.
Right. And tying this back to Dalinar too, sometimes life changes no matter we like it or not, right? Things just happens and we move on from one stage to another, and there's really nothing we can do about it to stop that from happening. And so when those transitions happens, that's also when we typically will start to recognize, oh, I need to adapt, I need to change along with it as well sometimes. And with Dalinar's story, back in the day, he is the Blackthorn, right? He is the force of nature that no one's able to stand up against. He conquers, and he goes home to his wine, and he feel like he's living the best life as a warrior. And sometimes we also have an idea about, okay, what is the perfect life like? And often when we're in it, we feel awesome, we feel great, feels familiar at first, but then life will throw you a curveball and pushes you toward a direction that essentially forces you out of your comfort zone and forces you to go and grow in another direction.
Yeah, no comfort in the growth zone.
One of Dalinar's heart curves was his wife's death and Elakar's death. No, not Elakar's. Gavilar's death that pushed him toward a direction where he is the man he is today. Like that we see later on as the bondsmith. Like those two curveballs that he had in his life puts him on a trajectory where he became the person that rallied humans and singers alike to fight against odium. Like that is probably something that he didn't even dream about, that he didn't even consider to be possible. And so we always get a choice whenever an adversity shows up in our life. Either we can continue to do what we do and always get the same result and keep feeling stuck, unfulfilled, unhappy, or we can look at ourselves and see, okay, how can I grow in this, through this adversity, through this challenge? How can I change? How can I become better? How can I act in a way that is in line with my values and provide my life with meaning, right? And that all happens with being willing to challenge ourselves and the way that we have been doing things, our beliefs and our habits.
No, I agree. And it just made me think, Joseph, to wonder what would happen if Dalinar hadn't had any adversity to make him want to change. If he would still be that warlord, and instead of having this amazing person to help stop Odium, in all likelihood, Dalinar probably would have been Odium's champion, and then I'm not sure what would have happened to Roshar. It would have been pretty nasty. So that those hard moments, they're hard. That's why they're called hard moments. But
Right.
they're like some of the most important things to shape us.
Right. There can also be transition moments. It just depends on how you want to see it.
Yeah.
I think you can't control the situation, and sometimes
Not always.
there can be really horrible situations. But I think we mentioned Viktor Frankl in an earlier episode. In between stimulus and response, there's choice, right? You can always choose what you do, and there's always something you can do to looking at your thoughts and your actions in the situation. What's the most workable thing for you to do? And it might not be the thing that comes naturally.
Right. And part of that is because when we growing up, we just absorb as kids what goes on around us, right? Culture is one of these things that is very subtle. It just happens around us, and we just take them in, and they just become normal. They become our worldview. And a funny example is when I was in anthropology class, we're talking about the concept of breakfast, right? And in America, when let's just do this right now. When I say the word breakfast, what was the first food that popped into each of your mind?
I thought of waffles.
Waffles. Okay, Garrett.
I thought of eggs.
Eggs. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
When people say breakfast, what pops in my head is a steamed bun. Right. And Americans don't go to a dim sum restaurant and have breakfast there, right? But for us, that is a very common thing.
Well, Taiwanese don't have waffles.
Right. We don't eat waffles for breakfast. And I found it really weird that in America people eat chips and milk for breakfast. Cereal.
Yeah, I've never,
so,
heard it described that way before.
Right, but it's like chips and milk for me. It was Frosted Flakes, But like I think like that was a really silly but also a very effective illustration of when like your culture will influence and impact how you see what is normal. And when someone does things out of that norm, that's kind of like, wait, what? Buns can be breakfast too? You might reject that and say, nah, I'm just not going to do that. Or you can say, like, sweet, I'm going to start having buns for breakfast, So that's a oversimplification, but the principle is the same.
For sure. For the record, I went through some breakfast culture change myself. I now think peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are a breakfast food. So I'm getting closer to your buns.
They talk about that in the DNAV model. Talks a lot about when it's a therapy model, but when you're born, you don't have any cultural context. You don't have any judgments about what's breakfast and whether a safe hand needs to be covered, or
you're a blank slate.
Right, you're born and you just notice what's around you. You just notice this feels good, this doesn't feel good, this is safe, this is unsafe, and that's about it. And then you grow older and you become the toddler or the pre-toddler that's always dropping the stuff off the table because you start to learn cause and effect, right? And we start to learn through trial and error. And that's a prime time to really like try new habits and
Right.
see if they work for you. And if they do, you keep doing them.
Mm-hmm.
But then we start to talk and learn our cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start to be told, oh, don't throw that thing off of the table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And the older we get, the more we're stuck in. Pushing things off the table aren't appropriate. But we all have that ability within us to just notice or to do trial and error.
Right. And learn what works and what doesn't. And a lot of times we have more suffering and we aren't happy because we fail to challenge that and try to figure out, okay, what is the new thing that's going to work and what isn't working anymore. And in Dalinar's case, Alethi culture is completely built on conquering, on fighting, on proving who is stronger or better or more powerful. And the more powerful is going to take control. That is the Alethi culture. And so at one point in Dalinar's younger self, like when he's younger, that provided him with a lot of purpose, a lot of meaning, a lot of drive to just go out and do things, right? But he has seen enough and he has lived through enough that the Alethi culture simply isn't what provides him meaning anymore. And he went on to In the Way of Kings and the Knights Radiant. It helped him try to pursue something that is different, that is more meaningful for him.
At least the conquest.
Right,
aspect,
right. Yeah, he doesn't find meaning in simply conquering anymore. Right. And I think for the better, too.
Yeah, I think he's starting to see in Words of Radiance is how when Sadeas rises up against him and the king, it's because Sadeas is following that culture of, I am stronger, therefore I must take the power from you, just like Dalinar and Gavilar did. And so he's realizing how it's actually hurting his people, so he needs to change it.
Right, there is a better way. And he's trying to find out what that better way is. Because he didn't know any other way. But he's trying. And so I think that goes very well into how do we do this? How do we apply this into our own lives? Because we simply don't know what we don't know, and sometimes it can just be hard to do this. So,
well, and especially these things that are just so ingrained in our culture, or just things that we've always done. One of the ways to begin to challenge yourself is to try to look at your life as if you were an outside observer. So, like us reading Stormlight books, we're able to look and be like, oh, safe hands don't have to be
covered
a covered
like
thing,
why?
or the strongest warrior doesn't have to rule. We can say that because we're an outside observer from another culture.
Right.
So in therapy, a lot of times we'll say, look at your life as if you were an alien.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you didn't know anything and you looked at the things you do,
Mm-hmm.
what might you think your values are based on what you do?
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense from an outside perspective?
Mm-hmm.
So that brings you back to, those early skills of just being able to notice and just being able to try things, right? As if instead of being steeped in the context, you kind of bring yourself out of it and look at your life and just notice, what am I doing?
How does that make me feel?
How does it make? Well, yeah. What are the consequences in my life, in myself, for what I'm doing?
Yeah. Why might not this be working right now, or why am I not happy, or whatever the question may be.
So that's the next one: is ask yourself why. Is you can look at the things you do and ask, why am I doing this? What is the consequence of this? You can look at anything you do and just ask why or why not. You could even just go throughout your day. Just everything you're doing, like I'm cooking dinner. Why am I cooking dinner? I want to feed my family, and maybe that'll connect you back to your values. Maybe you'll be like, wow, cooking dinner is so meaningful for me now because I remembered that I want to cook a nutritious meal for my family. Or you might look at it and ask, why am I cooking dinner? And you might realize this is a waste of time. Why don't I just order something? Like either way, looking at anything you do, you can ask why. And then identify, is this something that's approaching my values, or is this something that I want to adjust?
Yeah, the why's kind of keeping you on track there, seeing if it's the right path for you. Not necessarily the right path for everyone, but for you.
Asking yourself why is something I really think the Fused need to do, at least in Rhythm of War. You get more insight in them through Venli's storyline, where you see that the Fused, who are. I feel like I need to give a summary of who they are in a short sentence here.
They're like the Odium's version of Knights Radiant.
Right. Yeah.
Right. These fused have been coming back to the world
Over and
over and over and over again, doing desolations. And by the time of the books, or you learn through the books that originally they wanted to reclaim their land, right? Roshar was their land. They wanted to reclaim their land and their traditions. So they wanted to fight the humans and get these invaders out so that they can
preserve their own culture and their own.
Right.
Yeah.
But by the time of the books, they just want to kill humans.
They want to end the war by any means necessary.
Right. And then he gives them opportunities to, hey, well, why don't we preserve our culture? Like, why don't you stand up for our people? And they're not even
they don't care about
that anymore.
Yeah.
They completely lost their why, and they're just doing what they've always done. They're just, we kill humans.
Right. And they're tired of it too. Like, they know this isn't working, and they hate coming back millennia after millennia. But they keep getting locked in this cycle of fight, die, come back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is the cycle that the Fused and the Heralds have been locked into for eons, and drives them insane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's a definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the Fuse definitely is an example of that.
And if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Mm-hmm. And they just keep getting more of this back and forth war. They're not looking at doing anything different, and they're not thinking about their why anymore.
Right. They lost that completely over the years.
It reminds me of a behavioral principle. It's called an extinction burst. But basically, if something's not working for you, the first thing you do is try it again faster and faster, or do it more and more. And you might change it a little bit here and there, but at the end of the day, you realize it doesn't work and you move on. And that's where the Fused are stuck.
Yeah, they're stuck at the fighting and really not working on winning.
Their answer is fight harder.
Right. It took Rebonio, someone who's actually thinking outside the box, to really get them some headway.
So it's really important to look at what are you doing and what is it.
Why are you doing it?
Yes. In psychology, a lot of times we say, how's it functioning for you? Look at
how's that working for you? I often ask my clients that, and they always get kind of mad at me, but then they start thinking, and then they're like, "You're right."
Have you actually said that in session?
Yeah, I have.
I've thought about it, but I never have the courage to do that.
I have said that with clients that I had a really, really good relationship with.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
And they will say something like that. How's that working for you? Does that? And then they're like, oh, "You're right."
Right. So you're obviously in my office because you want something to change.
Right.
But we talk about looking at what you're doing and the form of your actions, or versus the function of your actions. Mm-hmm. And you hear this in like the Christian tradition as like the spirit of the law or the letter of the law, except I did those backwards. So the form would be like the letter of the law, right? This is what I do. The function is, this is why I do it, and this is what it's getting me, and this is why it's workable. Mm-hmm. That's more of the spirit of the law, making sure you have the why in there. So ask why. Look at what am I doing? What's the spirit of this? What's the function of this in my life? Why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm. Right. Another thing, we talked about the Fuse, but with the Alethi, they stopped asking why. They completely lost their focus with the Vengeance Pact.
Oh, yeah.
For a very, very long time. And that's one of the things that Dalinar is so fed up with, is that the Alethi High Princess just kept on playing this game of hunting great shells, getting wealth, and they talk about the Vengeance Pact, but is their heart really in it? No. They're not. Like that, like the Vengeance Pact has already been thrown out of the door by a lot of them. That's not why they're here anymore. Right? And Alethkar's suffering, and and no one really cares. And Dalinar's just like, why are we doing this?
Right. Like they left their homeland behind in name to avenge Gavilar, and they keep trying to avenge Gavilar.
Trying, quote unquote.
Or they keep trying to get more, what are they called? Great
gem hearts.
Gem hearts. Meanwhile, their lands are suffering.
Right. The queen went cuckoo.
Yeah, and they're not there for it.
Yeah,
They don't even know about it. Like, they have no idea what's going on. They're so focused on
right.
it.
Yeah,
In a way, they're fused too.
yeah, they are.
Yeah, they're
They
doing the
they're
same
just
thing.
yeah, they're blind towards different things. Right? But both parties forgot their why.
Mhm. So ask why. Look at your life as if you were an outsider, alien. Another thing you can do is look at your the language you're using. When you notice yourself use words like right, or supposed to, or have to, or can't.
Or my favorite one, should.
Yes. If you hear yourself say these words in an area, that might be a good place to look at why.
Right, and start challenging, why do I think this way? Right. And one of the things in cognitive behavioral therapy that I often do is helping my clients challenge their thoughts, their beliefs that doesn't work for them anymore. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of my clients like is the word should. Right. Um, and I don't know where I've heard this before, but but I love this phrase of "thou shalt not should on yourself." And when I started to think about it, and as I done therapy on that, it really became apparent that it doesn't make us feel good when we say when we talk of ourselves and talk with other people using the word should, um, because should always points out what you lack and where you failed at instead of pointing you towards change. A common one I see is parents saying to the kids, "You should be doing your homework right now," or
Mm.
that you should be doing your chores. Like, why are you still here? Playing with your toys. You should be doing this. You should be getting ready for bed.
I feel the annoyance just listening to you.
Honestly.
Right? And I think we all could relate to when our parents have done that to us, and yet we do that
To ourselves.
to ourselves and to our and we just became parents, and I'm afraid I'm gonna do that to my kid.
I'm already doing it to my kid.
um, but yeah, when someone tells you, "Hey, you should be doing something," does that really make you want to do that? Not me. It doesn't make me want to do the thing more. Instead, it makes me feel like I'm a failure. And I see that often with kids that struggle with ADHD, is they always feel like they're not enough because their parents are always shitting on them. One of the things that we can do to change that is we can reword whenever we notice we're using the word should. A lot of my clients like to replace that with can. So it's more of a choice driven, more of a future action oriented way of reframing. Is okay, I can go and do dishes right now, or I can't keep, sitting here and scroll on my phone. Which one is it that's gonna help me live my value more? Right. And that often is more motivating, at least to me, right? Pointing out, here's a choice point, and I have the power to make this choice.
I love that you say you have the power to do it. It feels like you said, it feels way more motivating. You feel like you're in control of your life now instead of circumstances making you should all over the place. Now it's, I can do this, I can change it.
And that's something that's research shows that you feel way more fulfilled and you do things more effectively when you do it because of the positive meaning in your life rather than do it to avoid something negative in your life.
Right. To
Because-
avoid the punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, telling yourself I should be doing the dishes right now, or your parents saying you should be doing homework, like, yes, it doesn't feel very motivating, but sometimes it is enough. Like, you still do, okay, here I go,
Right.
gonna do
right.
my homework. But you're gonna be less effective at it, and
And you're gonna hate it.
hmm
Yeah.
But when you sit and you're like, oh, I just remembered I have homework. I can do that right now. I'm gonna make that choice to do
Mhm.
that right now.
Right. This process actually builds character.
And Joseph, since you mentioned building character, as I always remember from Calvin and Hobbes, if you guys have ever read those cartoons, his
Yes.
dad always tells him to do these hard things that build character. So because it builds character, yes, all you Calvin and Hobbes fans, it's gonna be hard. So be patient with yourself. You are literally rewriting pathways in your brain to think differently. It's not just a simple snap of the fingers. You are literally changing your brain and you are fighting against your own history. So if you mess up a little bit, that's okay. It's going to take some time. Be patient and focus on each next step. Because, like Dalinar says, the most important step is the next one.
The key is consistency, not perfection.
Exactly. Yep. Consistent change is better than getting it perfect 3 times and then burning out.
Right.
We see in therapy processes, the first step to change is just trying something different. It might not be your new routine forever and the answer to your problems, but just throwing off the status quo and trying something different is that first step to be able to start to look at what's working for me, what's not. I've tried asking myself why. That has strengthened that pathway in my brain, so it's going to be easier to do next time. I've tried looking at my shoulds or the way it's done's, or looking at my life as an outside observer, strengthening those brain pathways, and then I'll be able to do it more in the future, and I'll be able to see if this new thing I've tried worked or not, and then try again.
Yeah. Journey before destination.
Ooh.
So, and you know who in the books that does not do this? Taravangian. So Taravangian is so stubborn about the diagram that he refuses to consider anything else. He is so closed off to other options and other possibilities because of the diagram. He doesn't account for other people's agencies. He relies on this prophecy that he himself had created. Even when he had seen the diagram fail, he continued to stick to it. Right? He is the classic example of what we talked about, of seeing it not work and continuing to do the same thing anyway.
Yeah, the whole time, Joseph, he's saying, oh, this should have happened. This should have happened. Dalinar should have turned here. What did we miss? We should have won right here. So, Taravangian's kind of just shooting all over the place.
Right. And the diagram fails, like you said, all the time. And he's always like, where did we understood the diagram wrong? They will question themselves, but they never question the diagram.
Honestly, I think the only time Taravangian ever makes progress, towards goals, is when he burns his diagram in Rhythm of War, and he decides that he's going to try to challenge Odium. He says, forget it, let's do something. And he actually takes a step towards his goals. Granted, we don't know how that's going to go in Wind of Truth, but it went somewhere. He finally made some progress instead of just sitting in his bed.
Right. Yeah, for so long, he's been shackled by the diagram. And when he finally burned it and let it go, he actually did something different and made a significant impact on the fate of Roshar.
Which is, it's hard to try something new and do something that you don't have confidence. That's a big thing with Taravangian, is he has a lot of self-doubt. Is he's very, I was a god that day, but regular me, or
it's stupid.
Me on any of these other days is not, I'm just not smart enough. I'm never smart enough. The me on that day was smart enough, so I have to follow the me on that day. But, I guess we didn't give a summary, but Taravangian has this what's it called?
This boon and this curse.
Right, the boon and the curse from the Night Watcher, that he's more intelligent on some days and less intelligent on other days, but the days that he's less intelligent, he's more compassionate.
Right.
Anyway, so he was really, really intelligent one day, came up with this diagram plan for how to save the world, and then he's stuck following the plan forever, even when it's not working anymore, and circumstances have changed because Dalinar isn't doing what he's always done. Dalinar's changing.
Yep.
And
his diagram isn't.
Right. Taravangian is so stuck on, this is what I thought that day. I have to trust the me on that day because I can't trust me now. And that self-doubt really holds him back for a lot of the books. While Dalinar has a lot of self-doubt too. He knows he's not good enough, but he's able to say, you know what? I have great people around me, and I know something needs to change, and so we're all just going to do our best.
Right. Strength before weakness. And that is what Dalinar did follow where Taravangian failed. He's so focused on his own weakness that he can't step out of his weakness.
Very focused on their weakness.
Yeah, yeah. And we as human beings, we have the tendency to focus on our own weakness a lot. And that's what a lot of people who struggle with anxiety or depression, they often, they can't see past their own anxiety, their own struggles, their own the situation that they're in. And so this is a real thing, and it will take work to work through them, but it is possible.
To at least look at that next step.
Right.
What's this one thing
Taking
in
the
my
next
life
step.
that might not be working?
Right.
How might I change it?
Right. And that this is the reason why, again, why we love Stormlight Archive so much.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're having a hard time finding that next step, if you feel like it's not working for you and you just don't know where to go next, remember that all these Knights Radiant, they had a spren with them. There's so many times that Kaladin needs Syl to just kind of tell him where to go next, and you can have those people in your life too. So if you don't know where to go next, find someone who can help you, whether that's a family member or a friend or even a professional. If you feel like that's the step you need to take, it's a good step if it's going to help you.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to our action item. We want to invite all of you guys to kind of take a next step. It doesn't have to be a big one. We just want you to notice your routines, be that observe your life as if you're an alien or an outsider, see what you're doing, and then ask yourself why. You don't necessarily need to change anything about what you're doing if you don't feel you need to. Just ask yourself why. See if you have a reason for it. And if you don't, maybe it's something you want to change. And if you do have a reason and it's a good one, that's awesome. Keep doing it. Whatever you're doing, just make sure you know the why, because it's going to make your life feel more fulfilling as you're finding those good whys that are leading you towards your values.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you felt inspired to take the next step on your journey. Please share your thoughts and experiences and add your questions using the comment function or by emailing us at fantasyframeworkstherapy@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. You can also follow us now on Facebook for between episode updates. And remember to learn from the journey.
We want to thank Dr. Dave Schramm and Rex Polanis from the Stronger Marriage podcast for their mentoring in getting this podcast started.